I never want to go caving again. Have you heard of the dark chamber? I couldn't believe I even agreed to do it, but if it would make Mel happy, I would do anything. The experience was advertised as a haunted cave tour by lantern light, and even though I've never been one to believe in the supernatural, I wouldn't have doubted it here. It looked terrifying just from the pictures online, extremely cramped spaces that they force you to crawl through at one point, sections with uncomfortably low visibility, and terrifyingly vast caverns that seemed to have impossibly high ceilings. It was everything she loved. It was a bit of a drive away from the city, but the scenery made up for it with its beauty. Twisting roads lined with pine trees lead our ascent higher into the Rockies. The cave was tucked away into the side of a towering mountain, a series of large log cabins next to the entrance. The air was pure and refreshing up here, imminent the moment we stepped out of the car. I took a moment to savor it, knowing we would soon be deep within the earth. We stopped at the main building where we exchanged our tickets for a lantern that was to be shared between us. It was bustling with activity, kids running around the gift shop screeching with joy. Just a reminder, at some points during the experience your light will be turned off for a moment, the woman behind the counter said with a smile. Don't panic when it happens, it's just part of the experience. It'll come back on. I picked up the object and took a moment to observe it, noting how there was no obvious way to open any of the panels or to turn the light on or off. We picked up some guide pamphlets on the counter and made our exit out of the cabin, following the trail to the cave's entrance. How do you think they're going to turn it off? Mel asked, staring at it swinging between us as we walked. Look at it, it's not an actual lantern. There's probably just a light bulb they can control with, like Bluetooth or something, I said. We stood before the mouth for a second before entering. As if listening, the light turned on. I had never experienced claustrophobia until the moment I stepped into the cave. Cold wind rushed through my ears, overwhelming my senses. Stalactites loomed overhead, casting long shadows that blended into the ever-present darkness that consumed every direction. Small lights lined the rocky walls, offering just barely enough light to make out the entrance and our immediate surroundings beyond what the lantern reached. I tried to imagine the children from the gift shop struggling to keep calm in here. We stood idly by a large sign marking the beginning of the tour. A few stragglers loitered close by, frequently checking the time on their phones. It was meant to have started a few minutes ago, but I guess they could just be running late. I'm gonna go run to the bathroom real quick, be right back. Mel nudged me playfully, already turning to leave. Hurry up, we might leave without you, I teased. She turned and rolled her eyes at me before stepping out of the mouth of the cave, speed-walking to the cabins. I felt even more uncomfortable standing there alone, feeling as though the walls would cave in and collapse on top of me. Feeling overwhelmed, I stared down at the lantern weighing down my right hand, watching how it illuminated the stalagmites circling me. I watched the shadows dance as a large figure shifted behind me. How much longer do you think it will be? This place is already giving me the creeps, said one of the men who had been standing nearby, now closer to me. He looked equally as nervous as I felt. I hadn't noticed him before, which was surprising given the large stature of the man. His fingers toyed with the creased pamphlet in his hands. Hopefully not too long. It hasn't even started yet, and I'm starting to feel the same way too, honestly. It felt good to know someone else shared my fears. Do you know how long the tour's gonna last? He thought for a moment, glancing down at his pamphlet. It's supposed to only be about 45 minutes, but apparently their dark chamber attraction tends to make it draw a bit longer. At least, that's what it says. I felt my pocket for my own copy, tugging the crumpled paper out. A map of the whole cave system sprawled across 3 pages, each one highlighting some of the main attractions in the different sections. The dark chamber was marked towards the end, a huge feature taking up most of the page. Traverse through our darkest chamber with only one light to guide you. Stay close to the wall. Stay close to your guide. They lurk in the center. They? Who's they? Do you see that last line in the description? I don't know. I think it's part of the bit they tell the kids where they So sorry about that, folks. A lanky man made his way over to our group. My last tour went a bit over. I'll be sure to make it up to you all. His voice bounced off the walls as he spoke, amplifying the volume. I glanced behind me to see Mel running over just in time. The tour guide smiled. Alright, let's go over some basic safety procedures. Most of the tour was uneventful. We wandered through different sections of the cave system, listening to recountings of its history and local legends. Fortunately, most of the things highlighted on the website had been exaggerated, like the passage you had to crawl through were actually just areas you had to slightly duck to get through. Our lights did flicker quite a few times, much to our amusement. The tour guide would allude to something supernatural and, on cue, they would flicker or turn off for a moment. Despite a lot of the tour being a bit cheesy, the tunnels themselves were eerily beautiful. Deep, cavernous ridges in the rock like claw marks decorated the walls. Our lanterns illuminated sparkling minerals and revealed giant, sprawling caverns full of history. There were roped-off areas with hanging employees-only signs, though beyond the rope was always pitch-black nothing. So many sections were blocked off that it made me a bit uncomfortable, but I suppose I don't have any other caving experiences to compare it to. Anytime we stood close to them, I always felt like something might try to grab me from the darkness, just waiting for me to move over just close enough for them to pounce. It was also just so cold throughout the entire cave system, and it seemed to just get colder the further we pressed on. Overall, though, we were both really enjoying the whole experience so far. Until we reached the passageways leading to the dark chamber. You know, the legends claim something roams through these caves. The guide spoke lowly, his baritone voice reverberating off the walls. Apparently, the first people to ever find these caves went missing. For a long time, we thought the system was discovered in 1947. It wasn't until we began having expositions deeper into the cave that their corpses were discovered, along with papers dated to 1912. He spoke with a voice that reminded me of a camp counselor telling ghost stories. Another group was also discovered from 1923. While they had long since decomposed, there was something strange about their remains. The clothes that they wore were completely tattered, with long, jagged gashes of ripped blood stained in their place. The rocks surrounding them were also etched with long, frantic scratch marks. This is a bit dramatic for a children's gimmick, isn't it? I raised my eyebrows at Mel for her input, but she merely shrugged in response. He continued talking as we walked through more than narrow passageways leading up to the attraction. It was surreal being down here. With so little light, we were completely reliant on our lanterns. I gripped the handle on mine tightly. There was a path that was so narrow that we had to walk single file to pass through, the guide's voice being completely inaudible until we made it out to the other side. Alright, so for this section I'm going to need you all to pay close attention. How this works is that we'll all be holding onto a rope to connect us all. We're about to navigate through the dark cavern, a place where almost no light penetrates, including our lanterns. Luckily, mine seems to always stay on, he said with a wink. It'll only last about a minute. For your safety, please hold on tightly to the rope and stay close to the wall. This is so performative, Mel chuckled. How much do you think the kids freak out? My cheeks flushed as people turned to look at us. I elbowed her lightly. We began filing into a neater line as they began passing the rope back. The guide's voice was mostly unintelligible so far ahead of us, but he seemed to still be talking about safety procedures. The man I had spoken to before shuffled in front of me. The rope finally reached him, our hands brushing as he shakily handed the end of it to me. I looked up for a moment and recoiled, shocked by the look of genuine worry on his face, sweat glimmering on his skin despite the frigidity of the cave. I wanted to say something, anything, but the people ahead of us began moving forward. Hurriedly, I passed Mel the end of the rope and gripped tightly to the remaining section in my hands. Remember to stay close, the guide's voice echoed off the walls. I watched his headlights slowly disappear into the darkness. We passed through the entrance into the section, crossing under the sign warning of danger ahead. In an instant, I was plunged into darkness. With the complete absence of light, it was impossible to see anything. Whether my eyes were open or closed, the same view greeted me, an oppressive black void that threatened to swallow me whole. Wind shuddered like cool breath against my neck. I wanted to collapse into myself. The rope tugged me forward. I felt my legs unwillingly move with it, forcing myself to keep going. My shoulder scraped and dragged against the jagged wall. I blindly followed the person in front of me, cursing myself for ever agreeing to do this. I felt the rope ahead of me veer slightly to the right, then immediately fall limp. A wave of panic washed over me, fearing it somehow got cut, yet I kept being pulled forward. Without letting go of my own grip, I slide my palms up the coarse rope, trying to feel for the man. It burns and skins my hands as I bend myself awkwardly to extend my arms as far as possible, yet I just keep going, never bumping into another person. The guide's headlamp disappears into an abyss of light ahead of us. Relief washes over me as I see the end in sight, my legs desperately pulling forward to get back to the surface. Blinding light temporarily shocks me as I emerge back into the entrance. My eyes struggle to adjust, but between blinking I saw the empty space in front of me. Before I could begin to say anything, we were being ushered out of the cave. The guide collects the end of the rope from Mel and corrals us like a herding dog to the exit. Alright, looks like that's everyone. I hope you guys enjoyed the tour. Please be sure to check out the gift shop and explore the other activities we have around here. Thank you all, and come back soon. He seemed eager to get us to leave. I suppose it was due to time constraints, thinking of what the man had said to me earlier. I look around for him once more, trying to spot his face among the crowd of us leaving, yet I still don't see him anywhere. We find ourselves back inside the gift shop. In between looking at tacky knickknacks, I find myself looking towards the door each time the bell chimes, hoping to see the man walk in at any point. I just can't remember seeing him leave. Hey, do you think the guy in front of us during the rope bit was part of the tour? I still haven't seen him anywhere. I think he snuck out or something to scare us, I say, turning to Mel. What? Who are you talking about? She barely looks up from the shelf she's looking at. You know, the guy in front of me when we were in the chamber. He completely disappeared while we were in there. He must have gone through one of those employee-only areas or something. She finally turns to face me, eyebrows furrowed in confusion. Steph, there was a woman in front of us the whole time. We found an abandoned structure in the middle of the wilderness. I wish we hadn't. Just outside of the town I live in, there is a massive densely wooded park that is largely forgotten. It's not that people don't know it is there, but it's simply more of an afterthought. It's not ideal for hiking, it doesn't have any kid-friendly play areas, or even a pond to attempt fishing in. What it essentially amounts to is miles and miles of wooded area. But me and my college buddy Derek had long known about something that lay deep within the park, and we had finally built up the courage and resources to explore it. Derek had always been into this type of thing since I met him a few years before at the start of college. Although we didn't know each other for that long, we quickly became best friends, forming a connection like I never had with anyone before. Despite that, he was the type of person who would keep a lot of stuff buried deep. I never blamed him for it, as his usual coping mechanisms tended to be positive, such as going to the gym or writing. But when his sister had passed away a few months prior, I didn't hear from him for a week. One day he finally returned my calls, and he had only one thing to say. Henderson Park, this summer. We are going to find it. At the beginning of the summer break, we began our hike. After a couple hours of trekking a route which we had planned and charted out for months, we finally made it to the spot. It was a clearing spanning a couple hundred meters in area, and once we made it past the last of the foliage, it didn't take but a second to identify what we had come for. In the middle of this open patch lay a large building, abandoned to time and worn down by nature. But yet it stood, beckoning us to enter. The abandoned structure of Henderson Park had been a legend in this town since I could remember. No one knows how it got there or what it used to be. It was simply a massive building miles deep into the wilderness with no documentation or history. I almost didn't believe it was real, but we had found someone previously who had made a detailed map of the park. We decided if the structure was there, we were going to find it. There it is, Sam. Glad to see we didn't come all this way for nothing, Derek said as we rested for a moment to catch our breath. You act as if we hadn't done our research, I responded, secretly as relieved as he was. There was always the possibility after all that the building had withered away, or that a small mistake in navigation would send us off the path. But, luckily, we had found our destination with relative ease. We took the moment to look up at it while we gathered our bearings and documented it with some pictures. It stood tall with at least 3 floors and had plenty of surface area. It appeared like it had been an old school or hospital of some sort based on its layout. Its exterior was a dark gray, tainted by the decay and moss creeping around it. Despite the wear and tear, there was a surprising lack of graffiti or any signs of human tampering. Well, you ready to see what's in there? I said, breaking the silence. Derek turned to me, a look of worry appearing on his face. No, I think we should head back. He then flashed me a big grin and began to make his way to the structure. I followed, trying to ignore his stupid joke. We made our way to the entrance doors and noted that they appeared to be missing, the only remaining evidence being some scattered pieces of glass. I noted at this point that besides the obvious weathering over time, this building did not seem old at all. In fact, it was as if a building from the modern day had been left to the whims of nature for a century. Before I could ponder this in too much detail, we continued inward, and quickly the darkness began to consume our vision. Derek turned on his flashlight, illuminating the hallway directly in front of us. It was lined with abandoned lockers and debris, which covered most of the doorways. Most of the paths on this floor appeared to be blocked off, or just seemed a bit unstable due to damaged pillars and missing walls. We explored what little we could safely access, until finally coming upon a set of stairs that could either have taken us up to the second floor, or downwards towards what I assumed was a basement area. We wanted to start somewhere, and work our way through the building seamlessly. That inevitably left us with a decision: should we go upstairs, or explore the basement first? Finally, Derek spoke up. Dude, I think we should split up. You can't be serious. How are we going to explore both at the same time? It's the only way, he insisted. Derek, I'm kidding, man. Let's start downstairs and we can work our way up, Derek said, descending the stairs before I could respond. The stairs proved to be much deeper than we thought. What I assumed was going to take us 1 floor down felt more like 100. After walking down the stairs for what felt like 10 minutes, I spoke up. Hey man, this is kind of ridiculous. How deep does this staircase go? I don't know, Sam. It's kind of freaking me out, to be honest, but... I nodded in agreement. Derek did seem to be getting genuinely concerned for the first time during this trip, but we were on the same page. We had to keep going at this point. Whether this staircase was bottomless or a descent into hell itself, we were going to see the end of it. Luckily, it turned out to be neither of those things, because a few minutes later we hit the bottom. Well, good news is if one of us gets hurt, the other only needs to drag them up 70 flights of stairs, Derek joked, although the thought only made me uneasy. The area we found ourselves in would probably be best compared to that of a subway tunnel. Well, without the actual train tracks. What lay before us was simply a long vacant tunnel with concrete walls and flooring, and no end in sight. I was beginning to feel like we were out of our depth here. However, I didn't think to protest as Derek began walking down into the tunnel. At least not until we began to hear something echoing deep within the tunnel. We immediately stopped dead in our tracks. What sounded like a high-pitched synth had begun ringing through the tunnel. The echoing was making me feel queasy as it reverberated through my body. It paused for a movement before resuming, every few seconds another tone ringing out like a beacon, progressively getting louder and presumably closer. The sound started to become ear-piercing, and before I knew it, I was on my knees holding my ears, barely withstanding the sharp ringing throughout my head. Just as I thought I was going to black out from the sheer intensity of it, the sound stopped in an instant. I looked over to Derek, who was also recovering from the auditory assault. We both shared a glance and a nod. Our curiosity had seemingly run its course, and we started to quickly head back from the way we came.